Hey guys, this is Joe Foster with Above the Treeline, and thanks for joining us today to talk about Edelweiss Analytics. Going to give a little bit of background here about kind of what the deal is. Really, there's kind of a wide range of people on the call today, so we'll do a wide range of information, basically. With just quickish background. So a lot of you probably already know. Above the Treeline started out with Treeline Analytics and started in 2002. And whoops, it hasn't changed that much since then, to be honest. And then we started out with Edelweiss in 2009. And just, you guys were surely part of the process of moving over to Edelweiss Plus. And we're in the process right now of building the analytics tools into Edelweiss Plus, so you get more of a seamless sort of experience. You don't have to log into two sites, and kind of taking advantage of the new platform and its flexibility and that kind of thing. I feel like I answered this question quite a bit. Why do I need analytics? And to me, I mean, probably because I'm so into doing this, and I kind of concentrate on this stuff all day, every day. But even when I was a buyer, I was a buyer at Maria's bookshop in Durango, Colorado for quite a while, and I used the analytics tools like pretty hard, and with really nice results, actually. And nice results meaning more profitability, better turns, smarter buying, that kind of thing. And there's a saying in the, I'm in Colorado, so there's a saying in Colorado. There's actually a somewhat regional magazine called the Mountain Gazette, whose motto is "When in doubt, go higher," and that's basically like, if you're lost in the mountains, then go up above the tree line so that you can see what's going on, see where to go, and see if maybe you can see a town, for example. But that's kind of the idea with the name Above the Tree Line, and also with the analytics tools, is kind of giving you that broader view of what's happening with your inventory, which is a huge part of your business, possibly the largest investment that you actually have in your business. So using it instead of being used by it. I don't know if that made sense, but I do see, I work with a lot of different stores, and I've definitely seen stores whose inventories are literally dragging them down instead of being the profit building apparatus that it should be. That's really more of a weight around their neck that's just dragging them under, and it doesn't need to be that way. It takes a little bit of work, of course, to fix that, but it's work that you can do, and honestly, like, you need to do it. The idea behind the analytics tools is to make inventory management easier. And one of the unique things about the analytics tools that we do is it is a collaborative tool, meaning that you get to basically hack into an aggregated view of what's happening in the marketplace among other users. So you can see actual sales at actual stores, anonymously, of course, but you're able to see that stuff and use it and compare your inventory to it, and that sort of thing. Is really kind of a unique way to view things. And of course, seeing what you're missing and staying ahead of trends and all that kind of stuff is always helpful, especially, doing frontless buying, especially, for example, is just a kind of a huge undertaking, really. I've always considered it kind of a low stakes gambling sort of thing, because you don't know. When you see a title, you have a good idea often of how a new title might perform if it's an author that you've sold before and that sort of thing, but you don't really know. You don't know what's going to happen. So being able to take that information, your experience and that sort of thing, and kind of coupling it with some raw data can be a really powerful tool in predicting how things are going to perform. And of course, using that your point of sale data in Edelweiss while you're creating orders, looking at comp titles and all that sort of stuff. But in today's demo, I'm going to show you how the newer analytics tools will help you answer these three questions. What are we missing? What should we return? And then how are we doing? Which is kind of a large question. There are a few different tools that can help you answer that one. The returns thing, honestly, it's a huge, insane loophole in the bookselling industry that should totally be taking advantage of. I feel like I was talking to somebody one time, and it was after one of the more interesting analytics sessions that I've done, and they asked me, kind of what my job was, and I was like, I'm trying to convince people to take advantage of being able to return books, and they just don't want to do it. That was an overstatement, but there's work involved there. But being able to quickly see what you should be returning is actually pretty easy, and we'll show you how to do that. And kind of what's happening with Edelweiss Analytics. Right now it's in beta test. There are beta testers on the site. If you want to sign up for the beta program, just email us at support@abovethetreeline.com, which is where you can email us for any questions that you might have. And there's a link down there as well to get to a little bit of information about the analytics stuff, but a lot less information than what you're about to get. And we are recording this, and we'll put it up on the site and link to it in newsletters and all that kind of stuff if you want to share it or view it later, because it's sure to be just incredible. Oh, comedy. Yeah, so thanks for joining us today, and we're going to go ahead and dive into the demo. Of course, I never do this as smoothly as I want to, sorry. All right, so as I was saying, this is Edelweiss Plus, and we are building Edelweiss Analytics into the new site. There's a lot more power and flexibility on the new platform. It's a more modern platform. The other one was from 2009 and showed it, I think. So the analytics tools are going to exist, among your other tools: orders and people and buzz, shelves, analytics. You'll be able to access it from your main menu there. So like the rest of Edelweiss Analytics, it's just a lot more visual and more eye-appealing, I think, than what you might be used to. But again, so we're going to separate this into those three questions. What are we missing is the first one. What should we return? And then how are we doing? So what are we missing? It's really kind of focused on these first two tools here. We have the most popular titles and then the not yet released titles. Essentially what these are ways for you to compare your inventory to the top selling or most ordered titles among the marketplace. So like with most things in Edelweiss, there's a lot of different options and settings that you can do. For example, right now we're looking at the most popular titles, the top 200 titles across the indie trade market in the last month. So essentially these are titles that are selling really well across the marketplace right now. And then that's what is represented by the entire pie here, and the different slices of the pie are this store's inventory, which you can see is Maria's. They graciously allow us to show their info, kind of because it rocks, to be honest. And we'll see more of that, but they're kind of ridiculously good at this. But what we can see here, so these are the green portion of the pie here are titles that, again, are doing great around the marketplace and also that are doing great at Maria's. And then the blue titles are in stock, doing okay, like nothing to necessarily brag about. It's still doing pretty good. And then the red titles, there's titles that they actually don't have. So titles that they're not stocking, that's what we're looking at right now. You can see it's kind of pushed out here. And then the yellow are titles that are on order. So we can change some of these settings in here. So you can change the market, Christian booksellers, the public library. So we are doing a lot of work with the library market lately as well. for the last few years. And so that a lot of the changes that are taking place in the analytics tools are actually kind of driven by the library market. You can see UK stuff if you want. Oh, then of course the different regionals here as well. And then the time frame wise, you can look at the current month, which is, again, this is just going to show you what's hot right now. If it's taking into account really just like March, so the last couple of weeks. And then you can look up to a year back as well. And you can change the number of titles you view, and then minimum copies on hand. And then the biggest change here, which I'm going to spend a little bit of time on, is the activity index. This is a way that the analytics tools are going to generate a number, which is essentially like a scorecard for a title, and based on your copies on hand and then the days since last activity. So that activity can include a sale or when a title was received. And then, so we take those number of copies on hand, multiply them times the days that since last activities. It's a really simple equation, but we can say, for an activity index number of 90, we're looking at, one title that has been sitting unsold for 90 days or less. Whereas the 365, of course, is one title that's been sitting for a year, essentially without selling. And so that's how the different portions of the pie are going to be delineated. And you can change these however you like. If a lower or higher number makes more sense to you, then by all means you can change it. This is what the default is going to look like. And again, so we're talking about number of copies on hand as part of the equation. So if you have 10 copies of a title, then it'll hit that 90 threshold, the activity index threshold, in 9 days. So 10 copies sitting unsold for 9 days. Basically because those piles of titles, those big stacks that you have, they need to be prioritized in a way. You have a larger investment in a stack of 10 titles, 10 copies than you do in a single copy. And so this really stresses that. You can scroll through the titles, you can get different information about each. So if you hover over a title, you'll be able to see your own information, 0 stocks, 21 days since last activity, and then peers information. So the rest of the market, whatever market you've chosen up here, which in this case, again, is the indie trade market. And then you can get additional information by clicking this little guy here. So this will show these titles in a more comprehensive list. And right now we're looking at a family view, which I'm not going to touch on right now. All right, so we can see market information here. This is this title, Annihilation, or this particular edition of this title, has been sold at 58% of all stores. It is currently stocked at 64%, is on order at 23%. We can also see that this store just doesn't have it. They haven't stocked it. So and that's what we're looking at actually, is all the red stuff. We can see in the green, which are going to be titles that this store does stock and are doing pretty well with. Radium Girls, you can see that they have 5 sales currently on hand is 1. Last sold and last received dates are here in their current point of sale category. Nice and easy view of what's happening here. And you can sort by any of these elements. So if you want to sort by units sold, for example, at your store, you can do that. And then we can select these titles. You can add them to a collection. You can create a PDF. You can export them if you like, tag them, that sort of stuff. If you want to go ahead and, you're looking at Children of Blood and Bone here, which my wife just read, and she loved it a lot. You can go ahead and throw this on an order. if you like. And you can also see some peer data, which we're going to get into a little bit more here in a little bit. So one of the nice things in here as well is, so right now we're looking at all titles, but you can also apply a lot of different filters in here, whether it's, you know, publisher, age range, publication date, subjects, all combined into one filter. You can very easily do that. Save filters are a big part of Edelweiss Plus, and you can take advantage of those here. Just keep in mind, so right now we're looking at Edelweiss vendor. If we can also go down and look at POS category, but if you select a point of sale category as a filter, then that's not going to work in the stuff where you're comparing across the marketplace. So really for these filters, for these particular areas where you're comparing, you know, across the country and across stores, your own point of sale categories aren't going to be relevant. So then you would want to use subject, which is BISAC. And like, for example, to jump into, you know, fiction genres, you can come over here, click this guy, and you'll see the genres exploded out here. Like if we scroll down, we want to see mystery genres, we can even, you know, go down, say, just show me cozy mysteries and how those are doing, for example. Like here we have a bunch of filters that we've been using, we've created and used. Like here's one that's just all the kids, like don't show me any adult titles. So you can see, again, around the marketplace, how, you know, what's selling the best, and then what you have and how your titles are performing. And you know, like we can see here, you know, in this light blue slice here, there's two titles here that the store isn't doing well with. Frankly, their titles have been sitting for quite a while, but they're selling well everywhere else. So that could be, you know, any combination of things. Just a display issue, like these aren't easily accessible to customers, or this community just isn't interested in these titles, that sort of thing. So that's one thing I always like to stress, is that you know your community better than we do, obviously. So whenever you see titles on these lists, we're not saying you have to carry these books by any stretch. We're just showing you what's happening, and then you can make your own slightly more informed decision, or, you know, infinitely more informed decision, even depending on how informed you were. Excuse me. But again, this isn't telling you you need to carry these books. This is telling you, hey, these books are doing really well everywhere else, so maybe consider it, take a look. So next guy down is the not yet released titles. And again, this is in the what are we missing subject. And in this case, what we're missing are orders for upcoming titles. So this is a way for you to essentially crowdsource your front list buying. I always suggest to folks that they do this, you know, look at this once a month and look at the upcoming month. You can actually, in these parameters here, you can change the publication date. Excuse me. So we can say, just show me the rest of March. And it's really going to delineate things according to on order or not on order. And this title's cracking me up, actually. So we can see really quickly which titles are on order around the marketplace that this particular store does not have on order. And again, look at the title detail list for those and get a little bit more information if you want. And one of the things I always like to point out as well is this new little guy here, where you can set up an email subscription that will basically send this to you whenever you like. So for example, you can say, you know, send this to blank email, name it whatever you like. Don't do daily. I've done that in my testing, and that's just too much. So weekly or monthly usually. In this case, I'm going to do monthly, and show me, you know, the top 25 titles. You click save, and that's going to go to this email address once a month. I sent one to myself earlier. And essentially you get a little email that looks like this. So it's going to have that your information about the title, and then the peer information, and a link to that title in Edelweiss. So nice and easy. And again, this is something that you can send to yourself or to a colleague, or somebody, if one of your buyers is responsible for kids books, you can send them a kids subscription, basically. So one thing that you can do, again, is send, so that we have a filter set here. So this is all kids. And right now we're looking at titles that are on order. So you could send yourself that. What I would do more likely is to send, just show me the top titles that I don't have on order, and I want to see that once a month. And so you can do that for all the kids. You can do it for history titles, fiction. You can do it for everything all at once. Totally up to how you operate. But I think just kind of a nice way for the analytics tools to come to you rather than you having to take the time to click a thing, which isn't that hard, but sometimes it can be hard to remember if nothing else. So that's kind of the, what are we missing subject. The next one is what should we return? And for that one, we're going to start at the stock analysis here. So this is taking your entire inventory based on what filters you might have set up, and basically, again, portioning that entire selection according to how they're performing at your store. So in this case, all kids titles, they're doing great with 55%, doing okay. They're stable titles with about 23%, and a little tiny sliver of stale, 0.4%, and then a bunch of titles on order. I'm going to remove this filter. This is one, in a sense, to be honest, using Maria's as an example here is often unfair, because this little guy is ridiculously small. I can almost definitively promise you that your store isn't going to look like this. I'm sorry to say. What we found is that the average for stale titles is about 20%, which is a pretty seriously sized chunk if you think about it. Basically, we're looking at titles that haven't sold in over a year. So if 20% of your inventory fits that, then definitely worth taking a look at. And that's the whole idea here. You can see a lot of these are street maps of neighboring towns and postcards and local authors, etc. So basically, they're pretty aggressive with their returns. Now, we don't have to just look at the bad stuff. I just did bad in air quotes. It's also looking at how much of your inventory is doing great, and there's nothing to be frowned at patting yourself on the back, and seeing what you're succeeding at. And again, you can look at different categories and filters to get a better view of that. But right now, if we're looking at stuff that should maybe be returned, we can look at this, click into the title detail view here. And you can sort this however you like, but what we're going to do just out of the gate is go to other actions, select all these titles, and then we can export this. So you can export it in the E+ Analytics format, which is basically just that title detail list in Excel form. And then you can do whatever you want with it from there, whether it's sorting and resorting and removing columns or whatever. Just you can make it look as pretty easy. Like all you do is hit create here, and it'll create a file for you. And essentially from there, you can just print it out, hand it to your night staff to get them out from behind the counter, and have them pull some titles. That's actually I would consider that a best practice. I've heard that from a lot of different stores, is they actually, the buyer will actually create the list of returns, stuff that they should pull. And I do think that the buyer really needs to be kind of intimately involved with that process to increase their understanding of what actually works at their store and what doesn't. Because if you just, all you're interested or all you're involved in is ordering books, and you never see this back end, the stuff where, you know, they're not failures so much, they're just stuff that maybe you thought the community would be interested in that they're not, which is fine. And again, that's that low stakes gambling part of the buying process. But, you know, having your night staff, if you have one, pulling titles is always a great way to get them out on the floor and doing something besides gossiping behind the counter. I just remember, you know, I would always get a little stack of titles on my desk the next morning, you know, saying with a note that said, please don't return these. And I would have to put that stack back on the counter out front and say, please sell these. Because of course, that's the name of the game. This isn't a museum. And that kind of served to reinforce what we were trying to do as a business, really. So that's the stock analysis stuff. There is a thing that we're kind of, it's actually built now for the library market, and we're changing it currently for the retail market, but it's going to be, instead of a weeding analysis tool, it's going to be a returns analysis tool. And this is just kind of an example. You know, basically on the fly, selecting, in this case, it's poorly circulating, which in the library world means checkouts. In your world, it's going to be more sales. Say how many months without sales. Worn is not so much a thing in retail locations. You can do outdated if you like, or years since added to your point of sale system, and you know, that's going to be mostly relevant for like travel books or computer guides, test guides, that sort of stuff. So you're not going to use that on every analysis that you do. And then you can set, you know, number of copies on shelf. So if you just want to look at stuff that you have 10 or more of, just a big flash, like let's weed out the stacks sort of thing, you can do that. And then you can choose, you know, whenever they come up, in this case, the potentially worn because of the library thing. But right now we're looking at titles that haven't been checked out at this library. And you can come in, you know, sort by author, and then print it out. And then that's your returns list. So that's something that we're working on right this minute, actually. So that is coming soon. Get back over here. So again, nice and easy ways to see what can be returned, what should be returned, more like. And then, you know, that next section is how are we doing, which again is just kind of a large subject. You know, how are we doing? I think what I found is, you know, when I look at stores, you know, some of our beta testers and stuff, I can come in and see really at a glance how they're doing by the stock analysis. So this is a rather new thing in the newer analytics tools, that whole stock analysis. We're really just looking at the entire store and seeing these different colors, how much of the store is green, you know, how much is moving well, and then how much is stable, which is going to be oftentimes, I would say, is most of the store, you know, is going to sell a couple of copies a year, or instead of, you know, 50 or 60 or more a year. And then the stale stuff, I think that says a lot about a store and how they view their inventory and how aggressive they are with returns and that sort of stuff. So again, I really think that stock analysis, just as a glance, can really give you a good idea of what's happening. Then within the historical overview, this is, if you're used to the older Treeline, this is going to be that trends stuff. Basically a couple years worth of sales that we can see here. We can, you know, the red are the last 12 months, and then the blue is the 12 months previous. See, it's fairly steady here. Inventory-wise, they went huge in November. They stocked up big for Christmas, and the sales were up there. But since their inventory was so large, they had lower turns this year than they did last year. which is totally what happens. There's two elements to the turns equation: sales divided by inventory, or that might be switched, I don't know. But essentially, if you increase your inventory and your sales stay the same, then your turns are going to be lower, basically. So you're being less efficient. Generally speaking, a good turns level is about 3. And that's when a store is strongly profitable. See, Maria's does great. They're averaging, turns-wise, they're averaging 3.6 over the year. And then newer one, you can see unit sales, which is often going to match what you see over in the sales one here. So it's kind of a nice quick overview of what's happening around the store. And again, you can apply filters here if you just want to see how things are doing in the kids, or just in one point of sale category. Just show me US history. You can totally just go ahead and measure that. And again, you simply just apply those filters. If we want to see just cookbooks. See, inventory went way, way, way up. And then here, in the sales, you can click on here and see, in December 2017, what sold. And you can see, numbers of sales and that sort of thing. The next one down is actually my favorite graph, the category performance comparison. So this is going to take your entire inventory, in this case, just the cooking. You can see we have this filter here, so now we're only looking at cookbooks. I'm going to clear this filter. What this does is it takes your entire inventory and explodes it out into, in this case, BIZAC categories. So it'll show you essentially, the genres of titles that you're carrying. You can look at BIZAC or Dewey if you want, then age, media type, reader type, and then of course your point of sale categories. I really like looking at BIZAC here because you can really dive into some stuff into those genre things. But basically what we're looking at are your larger categories are on the far right, smaller categories on the left, and then your lowest turning categories will be at the bottom, and your highest turning categories are at the top. So this 5 here represents the number of categories that fall into this high turning, high inventory quadrant here. Conversely, down here we have a couple, cooking and health and fitness, are titles or categories that would be considered overstocked. They're pretty large and they're not turning all that great in comparison to the other categories. So you get a nice kind of heat map of what's happening. But for example, if we want to look at cooking, we can click in here. And we can see how, among the cooking genres, so to speak, you can see how you're doing here. They're really stressing regional and ethnic titles, but their customers aren't necessarily responding to that, if that makes sense. They're maybe not as interested as the buyer thinks that they are. And the same with courses and dishes. And then you can just kind of scroll through here and see how these play out. What's fun as well, so we can click into regional and ethnic here, and then it explodes it out even further. So you can really just keep on diving in here. If you want to see, Native American cookbooks and how they're doing, you can do that. And then you can click here to view this as a list. And you see, percentage of the inventory and percentage of sales. For example, American cooking, 281 items, 108 sales. Turns aren't that great as a result. But what's cool about this too is that whenever you click into one of these different BIZAC categories, it creates a temporary filter up at the top of the page here. So right now, the entire analytics page has exploded out into, or exploded in, imploded maybe, into regional and ethnic cooking. And so you can see not only what's happening, how the stock analysis plays out for this, but you can also see what you're missing. So essentially you'll be able to come in, see what should maybe go away, and then see what should maybe come in those titles places, if anything. Maybe that just needs to be a little bit smaller if it's overstocked. Again, just a really powerful thing to do. You can come in, dive into a problem category, and then fix it, just by scrolling around real quick. And then to clear that filter, you just click that guy, and it'll refresh the page. And then essentially, rinse and repeat. If you want to see how your fiction categories play out, you can click into fiction, see where you're strongest. If you click this guy, classics, fantasy, and sci-fi are the largest and best turning portions of the store's fiction inventory. And we can click in here and see what's doing pretty good. Maybe it's not as big, but it's still up in the high turns area. Really up here in this upper portion here, you're looking at things that could maybe be, these may be growth opportunities essentially. So categories that turn pretty well, but that are relatively small. They're smallly represented, which, it may be just because there's not that many animal fiction titles out there, but we can click in there and see. We can go and see those 5 titles that are turning pretty well, relatively speaking, and then just maybe see, maybe there's stuff. If this is something that my customers are interested in, then maybe I'll beef this up a little bit. That being said, they may just be interested in 1 or 2 titles, probably the stuff in the green here. But again, it's a matter of what's there and how they're positioned in your store and all that kind of fun stuff. Looks like people just really like W. Bruce Cameron's work. Some people. And again, we can come in and clear that filter out and refresh the page. So you can, I guess the moral of the story there is it's easy to get lost in here. So I always try to suggest to people that they come in with a purpose in mind. If you have some time, it's time to do some returns, maybe come in here and find something to focus on, or you come in and just look for some titles that are stale in a particular category. If you're having a hard time shelving things in history, then maybe it's time to clear some of that stuff out. Better yet, I always try to suggest to folks too that they have a more holistic approach to it and actually set up a return schedule and return the entire store at least once a year. When I say that, I mean do returns from every category in the store, preferably more, just because the longer unsold titles sit there without selling, the longer you have something not sitting there that would be selling, if that makes sense. If each book is paying rent for their shelf space and 2 titles aren't paying rent, and then the title next to those has to pay triple rent, etc. I can get kind of hoity-toity about the inventory and return stuff. But there are ways as well to view analytics all throughout Edelweiss. One of those, we're going to look, the first one that you're probably used to is looking at your comparable titles. If you're an analytics customer, then you're going to see your sales and inventory history for comps whenever you're going through a catalog. But you can also now, so I just clicked into orders. I'm going to go look at an older order that I pulled up earlier. So this is the Random House Adult Spring Green 2017. So basically this time last year, most of these titles came out. Right now we're looking at it in the view that you're surely used to if you do orders in Edelweiss. There's a new view if you're an analytics user, and well, will be, I should say. There's an analytics view. So we can view this in a couple of different ways. So we're taking this order, so just the titles that are on this order, and right now we're looking at it, I should say, we're looking at the turns. So those titles that have turned the best or the worst from this order. You can also view it by that activity index. Kind of totally depends on how you like to view things. But like here, we're looking at titles that basically they ordered and they did really well with. You know, Killers of the Flower Moon, of course, it's a fantastic book, if depressing as all get out. And on down the list. So they can see those titles, they can see the turns for that particular title here, and then some market information for each of those titles as well. You know, the Vegan for Everybody is sold in 48% of Treeline stores. It's on hand at about a third of those stores and on order at a couple percentages. Killers of the Flower Moon, everybody's sold it, everybody's stocked it basically for the most part. And again, so you can also see those titles that didn't turn so well. You know, they did sell a little bit, which is great. And then, of course, really important, I think, to go and look at those titles that just didn't move. And you know, in this case, at this order, that it's 40% have 0 turns. So worth thinking about next time you place an order with this particular publisher, perhaps. Although, you know, it's more likely that you'd want to come in and actually look at each of these titles and see, you know, which didn't do well, and maybe try to think of why. I remember when I was buying, I would always, you know, had this image in my head of our customer, you know, like the perfect customer, and what they would be interested in reading, and you know, I often missed. Like, oh yeah, they'll totally be interested in Eastern European vampire fiction, and yeah, maybe not so much. But I would, you know, buy according to that perception of that customer, and you know, the ability to change that perception of your own accord, and you know, from experience, it can be really quite useful, I think. So as we're looking at these titles, there's a few other little tools in here. So again, you can look at this according to turns, or you can look at it according to that activity index. We can also come in here, and if we look at Killers of the Flower Moon, you can come in here and see your point of sale data, kind of the history of this title and how it's sold for you. Current on hand, and then the lifetime sales. You can also come in and see peer data. So this is that cross-store view if you're used to the older analytics. But we can see basically how this title did at specific stores, and they're just, your stores are going to be delineated by region simply for anonymity's sake. But your own store, we saw that Maria's did 99. You'll be able to see your own store. So some stores sold this like crazy, which is great. But having that extra bit of information, so you know, if you're looking at a title that you're not sure you want to bring in, you can come in and see, like, wow, people have really sold this. And you know, I'm in the mountain region, so stores in the mountain region appear to be doing quite well with this title, for example. You can also see how it's stocked at B&T and Ingram, just kind of on the fly there. Go back to the analytics stuff. So again, there are more tools that are being developed in here as well, especially if you're a multi-store organization, you have multiple locations, there's going to be ways for you to view your, I can actually add that in. Maria's just has one location, so it's not going to show quite as much. but essentially a way for you to take your different locations and see which ones are performing the best, and especially if you're applying filters, which one does best with comics and graphic novels. And if one store does horribly with that category and another one does great, then maybe you should move stuff over to that different store or buy accordingly. Again, just kind of gives you a little bit more information to buy a little bit more intelligently, which can only be a good thing. But it's the same sort of heat map as in that category performance comparison here. So you'd see a different store here according to how they perform. But yeah, so again, if you are interested in being a beta tester, we are taking on new testers now. Just keep in mind that being a beta tester doesn't mean that you get to go in and play so much as like go in and play and then give us feedback, because otherwise, what's the point, really? But it should be launched here in the next couple of months, and we'll be, more and more folks will be getting access as time goes by and as we kind of nail things in a little bit. But we do, again, like if you know how we operate, we really like getting feedback from users and stuff that doesn't quite work for you, or stuff that would work for you a little bit better if it did this, or you're like, wow, I like this a lot, thank you, or oh my god, this is horrible. We like all that feedback. Yeah, so if you do want to be a beta tester, right now beta testers do need to be existing analytics customers, because there's the whole setup and all that sort of stuff. But new analytics users will be trained on the new stuff rather than the old stuff too. So I keep that in mind. But again, thank you very much for joining us today. And if you do have questions or you want to sign up to be a tester, then support at abovthetreeline.com is your best bet. And that goes to me and like 6 other people, and we'll get you answered straight away. Again, thanks guys. It's always fun to talk at you. Hope the rest of your afternoon goes great. Thanks.